Starts good, fine, understood. So good, well, still good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today with a, well, probably a different panel because it's not specifically on sustainable finance, but it's rather on the targets or for the investees. I'm very happy to have with me Jean-Paul Scheuren, founder of BlocHome and also president of the Chambre Immobilière Real Estate Chamber, and Dr. Gaston Trauffler, who is head of industrial policy at the Luxembourg Federation of Industrials. To set the scene, I will just make a quick spot on that you, as you know, adopted the EU Green Deal with the Circular Economy Action Plan as one of the main blocks, while the financial sector is already far in its developments to make sustainability an integral part of it. The real economy sometimes seems to lag behind and to be not up to speed on sustainability matters. At least it's what I say, it's a perception. While on the one side, environmental regulations have a quite big impact on the industry, for example, on real estate, to make it for them more difficult to produce or to build buildings, it has also a cost impact, right? And that makes it quite difficult to have acceptance, in fact, for the real estate and the industry from the consumers, in fact. In Luxembourg, well, we have all the regulations in finance and in the real economy as everywhere in Europe. And there's also the Recovery and Resilience Plan, which is a roadmap for building an economy after the COVID pandemic. So this action plan, the RR plan, is based on the social cohesion. And that's where I would start with, is, well, maybe with Gaston. Well, as I said, Luxembourg is not an island, and we have all these threats, the geopolitical threats, health and environmental threats that everybody else. The Recovery and Resilience Plan is there to change for more resilient, Luxembourg, for having a more resilient economy, right? So how is the shape and the mood of Luxembourg's industry in these uncertain times? Regarding sustainability issues, is there a sentiment that it's one more burden for the industry rather than an opportunity? How does the industry react on all that?
Yeah, so I think it's no secret when I say that the industry has been hit quite hard by both the energy crisis now and also the COVID crisis. And the resiliency plan was very welcome. A lot of our members used it to do some investments, actually, and because the condition to get funded was decarbonization, for example, or energy efficiency, companies could take advantage to move on their energy transition. On the other hand side, the industry has not been waiting for those regulations to contribute. Industry is supportive of the climate goals, of the European climate goals 2030 and 2050. And if we look, for example, in Luxembourg, I researched the statistics between 2005 and 2017, Luxembourg industry in average reduced its emissions by more than 21%. So it's not something that is only happening now and since yesterday. Industry has always been working on it. The problem is, or the challenge here is that the goals are, climate objectives are getting higher and higher, but the frameworks are not being adapted at the same pace as the objectives. And just to give you an example, we are strengthening climate objective goals, carbon neutrality goals, but at the same time, we all know in Europe that renewable energy has not been developed as fast as we would have needed it. So we must pay attention here that because today we see that the European climate policy is too expensive. It must become more cost effective. And when I speak about cost effective, that means that it has to try to reach the same goals but less expensively, and that's possible. We see it every day in European regulations. The one that has been rejected yesterday is the best example of it. So becoming more cost effective is necessary, because otherwise we will have investment leakage. Investment leakage is already happening now, which means that companies are not investing anymore in Europe because it's too expensive or too unsecure. They are doing these investments in frameworks that are more friendly and less expensive. And this is a vicious cycle, because those outside frameworks, they have been created because we impose our climate policies to everybody else. But at the same time, we risk to be unable to follow or to comply with them on our own, because there is investment not going into our industry, but into industries with more friendly climate frameworks. So, and the ultimate game will be that we will have deindustrialization, and then we will have decarbonized, but I guess that's not what we want.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaston. Jean-Paul, you are more active in the real estate sector, as I said in my introduction. And in general, we can have the feeling that real estate is less blamed for environmental issues because, well, even if this sector is linked to big carbon emitters in cement and steel. So, especially in Luxembourg, but also in other parts of the world, housing is getting less affordable. So buildings are getting more expensive because there's not enough land to build on and regulations. So is my perception right about this approach, that it's rather a social problem that we discuss? And what can be done? Sorry.
Yes, before coming to the prices, let me state 2 points. The first one, when we discuss about buildings, we often discuss purely about energy and energy of consumption of new buildings. And when you look at it, what we have been doing there with the regulations, we change a lot of things. And today, buildings are very energy efficient. They are even energy productive. So the new buildings are not the problem, but we are not so stressed on the stock, and we are not so stressed on renovation of the existing stock of buildings. And there the results are very poor, but this represents 95% of our buildings. So we should find ways how we work more on this kind of solution. The other point is that we are also, when we discuss about energy, we often forget that life cycle consumption of material. That's what we need to address today in real estate. So it's not so much more about, we know very well how to build buildings without energy consumption, but what is much more important for us is now to see what is life cycle consideration for our materials. Now coming back to the access to the property, yes, access to the property is getting a major political problem in our society, so it becomes a societal problem where more and more people have no access to property, and where we have to know that housing is a basic need, so you need to live somewhere, and it's not a good like another good, so you need to have access to it. And the higher the access price for real estate, the more tensions you get on the market, the more tensions you get in your society. And what we see today in Luxembourg, but also out of Luxembourg, is that it really has grow the social gap. So even we impoverish even the middle class today. So we are not talking that people are excluded from the market only from the lower classes of revenues, but also in the middle class. And this really creates social friction, and we have to work on this. And you look at the affordable housing, what is important to address is it can be affordable housing, so being beyond affordable renting, or it can be affordable properties. These are two very different rules, fundamental different politics, and sometimes you have to choose. And this is one of the problems. We never choose. In Luxembourg, we never choose for one or the other, and so we have today more the problem of access to housing than access to property. So we think that the private market have solution for both of these problems, and we can address these affordable housing issues, but we need also politics that are open for this, and we need financial institutes that are also open for this. So we hope that the taxonomy can help us also to go on that way.
Thank you. Coming back to you, Gaston, I remember a meeting where we discussed about carbon footprint of the industry, and you said that, well, it's not with non-financial reporting that we will produce less carbon, right? So how does the industry contribute to achieve the climate targets and to have a more resilient economy?
Yeah, I remember that discussion. It was like 6 months back, and we spoke about sustainability of the industry. And indeed, I said that it's not reporting that will make us carbon neutral. I mean, sustainability is about doing the right things and then you can write about them, but we have to do them before. And so doing them means we need to launch those projects that will decarbonize ultimately our production. And afterwards, we can then do the reporting. And still, reporting is very, very essential. There is no question asked about that. But what we need to realize now are those decarbonization roadmaps of our industry, and they need access to finance to do it. You have to imagine they have assets there. We speak about energy-intensive industry assets with investment cycles of 20 to 25 years. So if you invest today in gas, you will be stuck with gas until 2040. If you invest today in a new blast furnace, well, that will also be there for the next 30 years. So, and at the same time, we don't have all the alternative technologies. You will tell me, well, we have alternative steel production. Yes, we have. But do we have all the hydrogen we need, and is it green? Do we have all the wood that we need if we would like to make direct reduction with wood? It was very impressive. The other day, a colleague of mine told me that they have in Ghent a blast furnace technology that uses wood instead of coal. As a reduction agent, and he says it's quite a small blast furnace. He says that if you would like to run this on full capacity, we would need a wood production that would cover for this only blast furnace an area of Belgium and Netherlands together without the cities. Right? So you see that this is not an easy task, and that's why when we speak about resilience, we must do everything in our power to keep the industry in Europe. What happens if we decarbonize by deindustrializing? We can pretend that we do not have a carbon footprint anymore in Europe, but we will import even more from those countries outside of Europe. So if we want to stay resilient, if we want to, I take the word of Mr. Macron, he says we'd like to stay strategic autonomously, we need those basic materials like cement, like glass, like steel, glass for solar panels. We would like to build again solar panels in Europe, for steel for windmills, steel and glass for electric cars. Right? All those basic materials, we can choose to import them, but then their carbon footprint will be probably much higher than if we do it in Europe. We have one of the most efficient industries here.
So, sustainable finance, does it play a role in it, and is the sector, is the industry ready for sustainable finance?
Well, sustainable finance is certainly again, it's a bit like in the real estate sector. If you are going to build a plant on the green field, sustainable finance is fine, because then you're going to invest into the newest technologies and probably not in brown ones, and then you will have access to finance, no problem. The challenge is here that if we speak about, for example, the steel industry, we have more than 80+ plants in the whole of Europe, and they are on the old technology. They need to switch. So they need to do the transition, and if you deprive them from access to finance, they won't make this transition. They won't even invest in anything new. They will just phase out at a certain time. And what's even more dangerous is that if they are deprived of access to finance, those companies will certainly try to sell those assets. And who will they sell to? Probably to countries that call us today unfriendly. And then we become even more dependent of those countries, right? Let's imagine Shell would have sold all its assets, its refineries, after the trial in 2021, where a court condemned it to reduce its carbon footprint by half until 2030. Well, it would have sold all its refineries, probably to Russia, probably to other countries, while our fleet is still at 90% petrol. So we become even more dependent on those states that right now we are trying to get independent of.
Jean-Paul, same question, in fact, to you. Is the real estate sector ready for taxonomy, non-financial reporting, sustainable corporate governance? What are the main challenges?
Yeah,
Better.
I see it a little bit different. I'm not asking the question if we are ready. I'm asking the question when it will be mandatory, because we need the money. We need the money from the banks, we need the money from the investors, and there will come more and more pressure to go for taxonomy and other regulations. So the question is not when, the question is how fast we will have to be there. And where are the challenges? The most challenges are to find ways to go to innovation and rehabilitation. But I think more when we look at construction, we are still building like 100 years ago. So we have to move on, industrialize the construction sector, and also reduce material consumption through circular economy approaches. This will be necessary for fight against manpower and material shortage that are today really our big issues. And I think also that new business models may emerge with this kind of solutions, where you not solely look at the square meters you build, but you also look at the building as a material stock, the building as an energy production capacity, and the building as a CO2 consumption capacities. If we look at this, we can see new business models coming up and being favorable for the development of the sector. So yes, there will be a regulatory impact. There will also be big change in the sector, and definitely there will be space for sustainable finance.
Thank you. So you mentioned it, well, it has to change, and you are one of the initiators of, in fact, I think, a very interesting real estate project, namely BlocHome. Can you tell us a bit more about this project, how it works and what it has to do with sustainable finance?
We have already passed our time, I think, of almost, so if I have to talk about it, I would take hours and hours, because the project I really like. It's a project where we are really in affordable housing and find new ways to access to property. So BlocHome is a new approach to democratize access to real estate based on tokenization and blockchain. We want to digitalize the whole process from the building onboarding to the renting, so that we can onboard people at a very low rate and also having very low fees for the management of it. By using the tokenization, we see that as an enabling technology. We are ready to give democratic access to property of real estate, a participative governance, and a peer-to-peer secondary market with high liquidity, and all this at once. For us, BlocHome is really the new way of redefining property, so we will have a new vision of it. So we see BlocHome as the possibility to define housing as a service. So like we see today a car, we use it, we pay for it when we use it, and we will also see it as said in the future for the housing, that you can pay for your house as when you use it. So it's an interesting project, so please look at it on our website.
Okay, well, we are out of time, so I would, however, like to ask the last question to Gaston. We can skip the last one to you, Jean-Paul, because I know you are also in a hurry. There's a recovery and resilience plan that expects to address a well-functioning internal market with strong small and medium-sized enterprises. Is that possible in future with all the regulations which are coming up, which are existing with this taxonomy, well, sustainable finance, but also related to environmental issues?
With regards to those regulations that we have talked many today, I don't see a big problem for SMEs. I mean, if we look, SMEs, they are less than 250 people, less than 40 million on the balance sheet. There are not so many countries of companies of this size that invest into energy-intensive, heavily polluting assets. So I guess that's not the biggest problem here. More the challenge is here the upcoming proposal of the corporate sustainability due diligence proposal that says that every company has to show where its products go and has to be able to trace that human rights are respected all across the value chain. Again, we are very much in favor of course, respecting human rights. That is not the issue. The issue is how we are going to realize it. Small and medium-sized company would be, it would be mandatory for every company to show that the pieces or the products that they produce are used in an ethical way. So, for example, if I'm a component production company, if I make a small chip, for example, for a washing machine, I must be able to guarantee that my client of his client of his client is not building this small chip into a weapon. And that is a huge challenge for a small company.
So we are done. In fact, I skipped the last question. Yeah, I know. Thank you very much for having been with us today and having, well, been with a lot of people out of the financial sector all alone, you too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening.